The Subcommittee for Indigenous Peoples of the United States will come to order. The subcommittee today is meeting to hear the testimony on the impacts of climate change on tribal communities. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chairman and the ranking minority member. This will allow us to hear from our witnesses sooner and help members keep to their schedules. Therefore, I ask unanimous consent that all other members' opening statements be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted to the subcommittee clerk by 5 p.m. today or the close of hearing, whichever comes first. Any objections? Hearing no objections, so ordered. Good afternoon and welcome to the first hearing of the Subcommittee for Indigenous Peoples of the United States in the 116th Congress. We adjusted the name of this committee to emphasize our renewed and singular focus on more than 2 million Indigenous peoples that we are charged with representing. As the only committee with exclusive jurisdiction over these issues in the House of Representatives, we have a great responsibility. As a body, this Congress can make countless improvements to the lives and well-beings of Indigenous peoples. And that starts here, in this subcommittee, where we will spend the coming months seeking solutions to address the issues these communities have identified. As a subcommittee, we will examine the significance of tribal sovereignty and self-determination, strengthen tribal consultation and honor our nation's trust responsibilities, ensure environmental justice for tribal communities, support tribal control of their own lands and resources, work closely with tribes to identify and protect sacred sites, uphold our obligations to improve the health, safety, and delivery of justice to tribal people, and lastly, ensure that all Indigenous peoples and tribal governments are treated fairly, as co-equals with dignity and respect. We have a lot of ground to cover, and I look forward to working with my friend and fellow Marine Ranking Member Cook and the rest of my colleagues on addressing these and other pressing issues. Today, we'll focus specifically on the impacts that climate change is having on tribal communities. These communities are on the front lines of the climate change battle, and despite contributing almost nothing to climate change, they face some of the worst impacts. From floods and wildfire to drought and rising sea levels, Indigenous peoples face existential threats to the traditional way of life, including disruptions of subsistence hunting and fishing, as well as their commercial activities and tourism enterprises. This is especially true for tribes along coastal areas who are already seeing changes in their lands, including the Quinault Nation, whose people live on the front lines of extreme weather risks from flooding to tsunamis. These climate-related disasters are forcing Indigenous communities to make some very heartbreaking choices, like the Tohono Nation, who had to resort to FEMA for disaster support after hurricanes caused severe flooding, or the Newtok village in Alaska, who had to choose between relocating their entire community or losing access to safe drinking water. And these are not isolated incidents. Throughout Indian country, the effects of climate change are evident, and they are increasing at an alarming rate. I'd like to also remind us that all the challenges facing tribal communities are a mere microcosm of the larger climate change picture, and that the harms of inaction in Indian country will affect us all. Tribes are stewards of millions of acres of trust and federally recognized land that provide habitat for more than 500 endangered species, contain over 13,000 miles of rivers, and nearly 1 million lakes. They also house stunning national treasures like Antelope Canyon in my home state of Arizona that provide tourism opportunities for visitors from near and far, but are at risk of erosion and other harms as climate changes. That's why it is important that we work hand in hand to overcome the collective challenges that we will face. Climate change is ignorant of reservation boundaries and treaty land maps, and yet Indigenous peoples are often left to fend for themselves in addressing the issues that arise, and that's just not right. We are all in this together. The cultures, spiritual practices, and economies of many Indigenous peoples have already evolved to adapt to local environmental changes. This knowledge, accumulated over generations of historical and cultural connection with the surrounding environment, is integral to this committee's work. In my view, this makes us natural partners in developing a climate adoption strategy, both on tribal land and for the surrounding regions. This committee's partnership with tribes to address climate change and other issues affecting Indian country starts today. To our witnesses, thank you for traveling long distances to share your experiences and educate this committee about the impact that climate change has on your community. I look forward to hearing your testimony. I hope that our members not only identify with your story, but also learn from you and your expertise as we develop ways to address climate change head-on. I now would like to recognize the ranking member, my esteemed colleague, Mr. Cook, for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As the new subcommittee Republican leader, I look forward to what I hope will be a positive 116th Congress as we work to address the issues facing Native American tribes and Alaska Natives. I also want to thank the witnesses for being here today for this hearing. Access to natural resources can be a lifeline to prosperity and opportunity for Native communities. That's why this committee has focused in previous Congresses on providing greater local control and autonomy to tribes to develop and utilize resources on Native American land. It is my hope that this committee will continue along this path and avoid the temptation to erect barriers to responsible tribal resource management and use. Eliminating or sharply curtailing the ability of tribes to carry out resource extraction or development on tribal lands would be the wrong approach. These sorts of proposals would devastate tribal communities that have built their economies around oil, gas, and in some cases coal resources. For example, one tribe relies on coal mining for 88% of its budget and will be left destitute by the new restrictions on coal production and use. Even tribes without significant energy resources would be hard hit by proposals that would increase the cost of coal, oil, and gas. Native Americans in the Midwest and Northern Plains who already pay a lot to heat their homes will be required to pay even more. Reducing the supply of reliable forms of energy would leave entire regions of the country facing energy poverty. For Native American communities who already face significant economic challenges, this result could be disastrous. Census figures showed the 2017 per capita income for Native Americans to be $19,824, compared to $32,397 for the average American. And the Native American poverty rate is 25.4 versus 13.4 for the rest of the country. The committee would do well to focus on innovative solutions to address pollution, promote jobs, and opportunity for Native Americans and Alaskan Natives, and lower, not raise the cost of energy in tribal communities. Today's question: how can we reduce pollution and promote a healthier environment while protecting checkbooks and job opportunities? Past opportunities, this committee has explored and passed legislation providing tribes with tools to achieve responsible natural resource management and conservation objectives relating to climate change. One of the best tools is scientifically sound active forest management undertaken by tribes with substantial forest lands. Tribes have proven to be excellent forest managers, creating healthy forests, removing dangerous fuel that contributes to deadly wildfires and the emissions of enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and pollutants. This committee should explore why the federal government has not implemented measures enacted by Congress to promote tribal stewardship, contracting in mismanaged or non-managed federal lands. When it comes to climate and energy, policies that impose a one-size-fits-all approach would not help tribal economies, especially when certain forms of energy are reliable or come at great cost to tribal members. Again, I look forward to discussing how we can find solutions and work together to improve the lives of Native Americans and Alaska Natives. Thank you. I yield back.
Still have my training wheels on. Thank you, Ranking Member, and I'd also like to recognize our committee chairman, Congressman Raul Grijalva, who has joined us today. Thank you. Now, please let me introduce our witnesses for today. And I'll recognize you, sir, when the representative. First, our original invited witness, the Honorable Fawn Sharp, President of the Quinault Indian Nation, was unable to attend due to the weather in Washington State. But we are fortunate that the Vice President of the nation, Tyson Johnston, was already here in D.C., so he will graciously testify in her stead. And I'll also now recognize Chairman Don Young, Member Don Young, for the next introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I was listening to your opening statement, and I was going to put my name on top of it. I think you copied my exact words the last time I chaired this committee. But I'd like to introduce a witness, one of my constituents, Jennine Jordan. She's the Government Relations Liaison for Calista Corporation. She is an Inuit, and her family is from Unalakleet, and I'm quite proud of her efforts to try to bring forth messages from my native community in the state of Alaska. Yield back.
Thank you, Butch. Next, we will be introducing Dr. Shirley Buzzard, President of the Building Resilient Communities for Climate Extremes BRACE Institute. And finally, our last witness is the Honorable Verlon Jose, Vice Chairman of the Tohono Nation in Arizona. Let me remind the witnesses that under our committee rules, they must limit their oral statements to 5 minutes, but their entire written statement will appear in the hearing record. When you begin, the lights on the witness table will turn green. After 4 minutes, the yellow light will come on. Your time will have expired when the red light comes on, and I will ask you to please wrap up your statement. I will also allow the entire panel to testify before we question the witnesses. The chair now recognizes Vice President Tyson Johnston to begin his testimony. Thank you.